Nabila Ramdani joins me now from London. Good to have you on the program with us. It didn't take long for the French president to get over to Lebanon. It was just the very next day, and his visit hasn't come without its critics. How do you view Macron's visit to Lebanon?
Well, clearly this was a hugely important visit. Beirut has just suffered one of the worst disasters in its history, and it was hugely important that a world leader of considerable standing arrived not only to inspect the damage for himself, but to mingle with the principal victims, of course, which are the Lebanese people. And Macron didn't just head off to see the Lebanese president and other rich and powerful figures who make up the Lebanese elite. He wanted to be with ordinary people, and his walk around Beirut made the top of news bulletins all over the world. And of course, some might argue that it was a great PR triumph for Mr. Macron himself, and it will boost his popularity globally. But I think we have to give him a lot of credit for making such an effort. Bear in mind as well that he didn't just come with the usual platitudes that you might expect from a foreign leader in a situation like this. He acknowledged that there are endemic problems in Lebanese society, and he said he wanted to help fix them, not just with aid and money, but by working closely with with all political groups in the country to make sure that the resources are used properly and don't just end up in the hands of the corrupt elite.
Mm-hmm. There has been suggestion, though, that Lebanon's leaders are merely pawns and puppets of foreign powers. Do you think this visit reiterates that? And is France trying to take advantage of the situation, or are they lending a helping hand to people in need?
Well, it's important to say that France had a colonial mandate over Lebanon from the 1920s until the 1940s. And in that sense, it considers that it has a duty of care for what amounts to its former colony. Lebanon is one of the world's great Francophone countries. It carries a great deal of trade with France, and there are lots of other links between the two countries, not least of all, because lots of Lebanese people live in France, and conversely, a lot of French people live in Lebanon too. So the visit has generally been received well from top to bottom. Ordinary people want Lebanon to be a priority for the rest of the world. And the way to do this is to have a high-ranking foreign visitor interested in what's going on. Now, this terrible explosion on Tuesday was an example not just of potentially terrible bad management of the port facilities in Beirut, but also of wider problems throughout Lebanese societies. And this include terrible economic management. Debt is chronic, and unemployment and inflation are sky high. There's also a massive refugee crisis with Lebanon, in Lebanon, with men, women and children fleeing conflicts in local trouble spots such as Syria and indeed Palestine. And of course, remember that there was a horrendous 15-year civil war, which only ended in 1990. No, that might sound like a very recent date, but in terms of bitterness and hate, it unleashed during the Civil War. This is actually very recent, and the scars still run very deep. And to that, of course, we can add huge sectarian divisions exemplified in the government system. And there's a lot of infighting and indeed terrorism. So, of course, as always, a lot of money will be poured in, and there will also be medical aid and food. Remember that some of the victims were French nationals, and there's every reason that the aid will be pretty substantial. But this doesn't mean that Macron's intervention is going to solve what amounts to a broken system of governance in Lebanon.
Right. Certainly, the Lebanese people have had to deal with a lot over the decades. There isn't much choice, though, at this point, from where Lebanon gets help from, whether it's from France or other countries. What's the best case scenario, and are you worried about other countries stepping in and possibly taking advantage of Lebanon's situation? Countries like China, Saudi Arabia, for example.
Well, I think, the Lebanese people's primary concern at the moment is to get help from wherever it can, frankly. And that's why it could do with more international visitors, heads of states, drawing attention to not only this horrendous crisis triggered by, those Hiroshima-style, explosions, but also to draw attention to a country that has been for decades mismanaged, not least of all because of corruption and indeed just wider chronic problems that leave Lebanon without the basic infrastructures functioning, basic public services functioning. At the moment, it's also trying to negotiate a massive financial package from the IMF. So any, power around the world that could indeed help lift not only deep-seated but also chronic problems within Lebanese society, I'm sure would be hugely welcomed by the local population.
Okay, and we'll leave it there for now. Nabila Ramdani in London, thank you so much.